Exodus chapter 8, continuing right on through Exodus. And of course I put Exodus. Oh, actually, this is Exodus chapter 7. We need Exodus chapter 8 up there. Someone will get that fixed for us. I'll tell you right now what it is. We're going to see Exodus chapter 8, three main divisions: Plague 2, Plague 3, and Plague 4. Plague 2, Plague 3, and Plague 4. So right on down the line. And what we're seeing is we are seeing God's patience, His mercy, as He deals with Pharaoh. And we are continuing to see Pharaoh's stubbornness. We'll see that through the three plagues this morning. Let's go ahead and look at Exodus chapter 8, verse 1, where we get into our plague number 2, which is about frogs. And the first thing we see here is that there is a caution. If you're taking notes, you can write down caution. And the Lord spoke to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, say to him, 'Thus says the Lord.'" Now, again, this is the pattern, and we're going to see this throughout this chapter, that God is reaching out first. God is extending His hand to Pharaoh. Thank you very much, Robert. There it is. Plague 2, Plague 3, Plague 4. Plague 2, where are we at? Cautioned. Thank you. God is always reaching out, and that really is the pattern. That's the way it always is, even to this day. God reaches out to us in our time of need. God reaches out to us, attempting to get our attention. It's not that we're looking for Him, but He is searching for us. And here He's speaking to Pharaoh through Moses, and He says, here's the message in verse 1. "Let my people go, that they may serve me." Let them go. Now, while this sounds like, and I may be guilty of this, of making it sound this way, it may sound like, well, not a big deal, just, all He's saying is let the people go. But I want you to understand Pharaoh's frame of mind. Pharaoh has all of these slaves. These slaves are his. They belong to him. They belong to Egypt. And when God says, "Let my people go," there's a distinction being made. They're not your people, first of all, and Pharaoh understood that. But at the same, he understood that they were Hebrews and he was Egyptian. But at the same time, Pharaoh has ownership over these people. He has them enslaved. And for God to say, "Let my people go," there's a distinction. He's telling Pharaoh straight up, "These are my people, they're not yours. So let them go." And then he goes on to say that they may serve me. Well, who are they currently serving? They're currently serving Pharaoh. And God is saying, let them go. You don't have ownership of them. Free them, let them go, because they need to rightfully be serving me, God says. We all need to understand something that I think a lot of us miss, and I'm going to tell you now, and I've told you before, but I'm going to tell you now while you're young, so that when you're in your 20s or 30s, you don't have to come to me and be surprised and like, "Hey, well, I'm having all these issues and problems," and then I tell you, "Well, it's because of such and such," so I'm going to share that with you now. When Jesus Christ freed you and I, He didn't set us free to just set us free like, okay, now just, go wherever you want, do whatever you want. We were freed from in order to be freed to. In other words, we were freed from slavery to the flesh, to the world, to sin. Freed from that. But we are made free not to just run wild and, just go find yourself and go do whatever you want to do. We're freed from in order to be freed to serve God. There's freedom in serving God. It's not like serving Pharaoh. It's not like serving the flesh. It's not like serving Satan or the world. So we're saved from in order to be saved, or freed from in order to be freed to. And here He's saying, "Hey, let my people go. I want you to let them go so that they're free from you, Pharaoh, and free to come and serve me where they rightly should be serving." Verse 2. Now, I'm sorry, real quickly before I move on, I need to make my point about sharing that with you while you're still young. I've told you this before. There are a lot of Christians older than you that they've kind of done the what they were supposed to do. They got their education, they got married, they've got 2.3 kids or whatever the average is. They've got, the SUV, and they've got the nice grass, and they've got, they've done it all. They get nice haircuts and the whole thing. And then they show up here and say, listen, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, but I'm still struggling, and I don't really understand, like, what's the problem? It's like, I still feel empty inside, and, I thought I was supposed to be, filled with joy and, satisfied and all of those different things. Well, the problem is, for many of them, is they were never told that. They were never told that they were freed, but not free to just roam and just figure things out and do things on your own and live your own life, but they were freed in order to submit themselves to God. And they got saved years ago, maybe at a camp when they were a teen or when they were younger or whatever, and they've made all of the so-called right choices along the way, living a nice life, but they never understood that concept of my life is no longer my own. I wasn't just, God wasn't saying there's purpose here. It's not let my people go so that they can just go wander around the world. It's with a specific purpose. Let them go so that they can serve me. And when God sets us free, it's not just freedom to go do whatever you want and figure it all out for yourself. It's freedom for you to submit yourself and your will to God's will, and to spend time seeking Him, searching for Him, and looking for His will for your life. And so you and I must understand that our lives are no longer our own. It's not just living it for ourselves. We gave it away to God. So, in verse 2, he warns them here, but if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all your territory with frogs. Now, why frogs? Why frogs? I told you that these plagues were going to be direct assaults on some of the Egyptian gods. The Egyptian goddess Heket, Hequet, was always pictured with the head of a frog. The ancient Egyptians, among the ancient Egyptians, frogs were considered sacred and could not be killed. So he's about to let loose all of these frogs on Egypt, and they're because the frogs are sacred, they cannot kill them. So they're just going to let them run wild. They worshipped frogs because they were common around the Nile, obviously, but because they reproduced rapidly, and also because they were amphibians. They were seen as powerful because they could live on land or in the water. And so as God is pronouncing this judgment on them, it's not just on the people. It's not just, I think I'll show them some frogs. It's not only those things. It's not only, listen, this is a sign. This is just really a snippet of the judgment that I have. Let my people go, or it's going to be even worse than this. But at the same time, it is an assault. Remember that God said, listen, I'm going to show the Egyptians who I am. They don't know who God is. Remember Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should set these people free? Who's the Lord that I should listen to him? Why? Because he's got gods for everything. He's got, so to speak, he's got a God for the lights, and he's got a God for the walls, and he's got a God for the floor, and he's got a God for the speakers, and he's got a God for the TVs. So what do I need you for? Is essentially what he's telling Moses. What do I need the Lord for? I've got a God of the Nile, I've got a God of the frogs, I've got a God of the land, of the sun, of the sea, he's got it all. The sand. So what do I need you for? I don't know who you are. This is just another God among the many gods. And so God says, okay, well, I'm going to show you who I am. And in the process, show you that your gods are false. They're false idols. They're false gods. They're idols. So he goes on in verse 2. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all your territory with frogs. So the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into your house, into your bedroom. Think about that. On your bed, into the houses of your servants, on your people, into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls. And the frogs shall come upon you, on your people, and on all your servants. In other words, this plague is going to be thorough. This plague is going to affect every single area of your life. is going to affect every single area of your life. God is going to be thorough in his judgment. He's trying to warn Pharaoh, like, look, your people are going to suffer. You got to, relent, let the people go. It is, think about this. This was back in the rainy months, whatever that it means around here. But we were leaving one night on a Wednesday night here, and we were walking over to our vehicles in the back, and we saw a frog. Matt picked up the frog. I don't know if he ever told you or not, but he came home with a frog on his hands. But he picked up the frog, and he was excited. Guys, we're excited. It's like, oh, frog, And it's like, oh, let me see the frog, and you want to touch it and all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of cool. You see one frog, and it's like, it's slimy, and then you pick it up, and it like pees on you or whatever it does, and it's just like, oh man, what, don't say anything about warts. Okay, go ahead. No. But frogs are so cool. But you can imagine hundreds, thousands, millions, I don't know, whatever it meant. Every time, you wake up in the morning, you got frogs on you and in your bed. You go to the bathroom, frogs in there. Trying to take a shower, frogs in there. You go to cook something, there's frogs in there. Everywhere that you go, there are frogs. It might be fun at first, to hear them, to see them, to handle a couple of them. But when there is a multitude of them, no good. Verse 5, so first of all, cautioned. Secondly, let's see if we can get it up there. There it is. Calling forth frogs. So here it is. He warned Pharaoh. Evidently, Pharaoh did not mind the warning, did not care. And so in verse 5, then the Lord spoke to Moses. Say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up on the land of Egypt. Now, this is the second of 2 plagues. Does anybody remember what the first plague was? What was it? Turn water into blood. So it had to do with water. Here's another one that has to do with water. We're going to call all the frogs out of the water. Where am I at? Verse 7. Verse 6. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians, there they are again. Remember the magicians from a few chapters back. The magicians, what were they called? They were called wise men, magicians. But remember that they were directly related to the occult. So these were, I believe, that what these men were people that were in direct contact with demons. Now, whether they knew they were in direct contact with demons, or if they just thought we have these magical powers that we got from the gods, or whatever they were thinking, I don't know. But here they are in verse 7, and the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs on the land of Egypt. Thanks a lot. We didn't have enough frogs, so you guys go out and you make more frogs. You call more frogs forward. This is silliness. But we've talked about this already, how that this is simply a cheap duplication, a cheap copy of what God has already done. Now, if they really had power, they would have called all the frogs back into the Nile. Get out of here. Clear the land. But they didn't. The best that they could do was to copy what God had done. The best that the world can do is to copy what God has already done. This is the reason why we have false Christs. This is why we have people like David Koresh or other people throughout history that have called themselves Jesus. No doubt there are still some today that we haven't heard about yet because they haven't killed people or they haven't blown people up yet or whatever. But in the past, in the recent past, not so long ago, we know that there are people who have called themselves Jesus. They have considered themselves to be Jesus. It's a cheap copy of what God has already done. God already sent Jesus. The best that Satan can do is to copy what God has already done. And really, again, it's a cheap copy. It's a false copy. So, calling forth the frogs. Now what we see is finally a change of heart. Verse 8. Then Pharaoh, yes, that's right, Pharaoh has this change of heart. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord. In other words, beg the Lord, pray to the Lord, call the Lord, and ask him this, that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may sacrifice to the Lord. So we see this change of heart in Pharaoh. Here it is. This is what they've been waiting for. Okay, ask God to take away the frogs. I'm going to let the people go so that they can go and sacrifice to the Lord. And Moses said to Pharaoh, look at this, accept the honor of saying, when I shall intercede for you, for your servants, and for your people, to destroy the frogs from you and your houses, that they may remain in the river only. So what he's doing is he's telling Pharaoh, okay, I will go and I'll talk to God. You all right? All right. Quit touching girls, okay? What he's doing is he's offering to Pharaoh, okay, I'm going to talk to God so that you know that God, this is why he's doing it, so that you know that God is genuine, that he's the real deal. You pick the time, Pharaoh, you pick the time when you want for God to send those frogs away. You pick the time. Pharaoh says, okay. For the life of me, I do not understand why Pharaoh did what he did, but look what it says. Verse 9, and Moses said to Pharaoh, accept the honor of saying when I shall intercede for you, for your servants and for your people, to destroy the frogs from you and your houses, that they may remain in the river only. So he said, tomorrow. Tomorrow? Why not like right now? Or like, hey, in 30 minutes? Or why tomorrow? Verse 10, so he said tomorrow, and he said, let it be according to your word, that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. So, let it be tomorrow. According to what you said, Pharaoh, that's I'm going to ask God to do it at your request, Pharaoh. So now you have God, Moses going to God, God answering Pharaoh's request. Answering Pharaoh's, so to speak, his prayer. Pharaoh's request was, make him go away tomorrow. He said, all right, that's what I'm going to ask. And so it says, verse 11, they will depart, they'll be gone, they shall remain in the river only. Verse 12, then Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh. And Moses cried out to the Lord concerning the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. So Moses and Aaron, they go out from Pharaoh. Moses cries out to the Lord and asks, hey, please take these frogs away. Verse 13, so the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, and out of the fields. They gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. You bet it did. Now, this is going to be so sad, but I'm going to share this with you. Very embarrassing point in my life, very dark time in my life when I was very young, probably junior high or younger, near my house there in beautiful sunny San Bernardino. Right around the corner from where I lived, there was a ditch or a whatever it is. It's a wash, we used to call it. You know, you go down there at certain times of the year, there was water down there. And so we went down, my cousins and I would go down there, and we caught a bunch of pollywogs. How many of you like pollywogs? You guys know what pollywogs are? Anybody? Nobody? Tegan, do you know what it is? What is it? Could you tell us? Tadpoles. Yeah. Which turn into what? There it is. Do you guys know what tadpoles are? A little bit. You guys don't have tadpoles in Menifee? Never mind. Anyways, went and caught a bunch of tadpoles. And we took them home, bunch of them, put them in a fish tank, filled it with water, like, man, we're going to have a bunch of frogs. It didn't take very long. Go back outside, and all of these things are dead. Some of them started to turn into frogs, but they all just died inside that tank. The tank stunk like death. It was so bad. You can imagine all of these frogs fill the lands. They're in the ovens. They're in their beds. They're in their, wherever they're at, there are frogs. Now, all of a sudden, God wipes them all out. Now, again, remember that the frogs are sacred. They were sacred. Could not be killed by the Egyptians. And yet, God wipes them all out. What does that say to the Egyptians? It shows that God has authority over the water. He's already showed that. Over the animal kingdom. God wipes them all out. And so in verse 15, look at this. Remember, we call this change of heart. Verse 15. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and did not heed them as the Lord had said. So as soon as he realizes, hey, we're free, he's like, forget that. You guys are not going anywhere. And he will not let the slaves, the Hebrew slaves, go. Let's move into plague number 3. Plague number 3. Beginning at verse 16. So the Lord said to Moses, because of that, say to Aaron, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land. This is plague number 3. And what we're going to see here is that God is moving from the water to land. And so we titled this Power Over Land. So we've already seen that God has power over the water. Obviously, he's got power over the not only the water, but what comes out of the water. In verse 16 now, he tells Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your rod, strike the dust of the land, the dirt, the sand, so that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. Geb, G-E-B, Geb, the Egyptian god of the earth. The Egyptian god Geb was believed to rule over the dust of the earth. And yet here is God saying, I'll do what I want with the dust of the earth. And he does just that. And so in verse 17, they did so. For Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth. And it became lice on man and beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. The other thing that we're seeing now is this. What's the word I'm looking for? It's intensifying. First, it was just the water turning to blood. I say just. What I mean, it was just the water that was affected. Now, all the people could not drink the water, obviously. But then the next thing we see is we see animals coming up, the frogs coming up and invading the lives of the Egyptians. Okay? Now we see lice, but not only lice, and it's getting on the people, but it's also getting on the animals. And so you have problems like the Egyptian priests who need to sacrifice animals to their false gods, unable to do so, not only because the priests themselves have lice, but they also would be touching animals with lice. They would be considered unclean. So you can imagine, I don't know, you don't have to raise your hand on this one, okay? And just pretend like you don't know what I'm talking about, like you did with the pollywogs and tadpoles a few minutes ago. But I can remember lice. My sisters, I had 2 sisters, always had long hair. Hispanic, long black brown hair, okay? And when they were younger, a couple of times I remember them getting lice from somewhere, from school, whatever, I don't know. And I remember my mom having to shampoo their hair with some stinky shampoo. And then they would have to just go in there and like squeeze the hair. Just pretend like you don't know what I'm talking about. Squeeze that. They would find the little lice or eggs or what, I don't know what they were. And they would have to pull those things all the way down that long hair. This is why, I don't know if you knew this or not. Oftentimes, I know this because I am Hispanic, so I can say this, okay, YouTube? Don't be all offended, okay? Oftentimes you will see, you don't see it so much anymore because of the shampoo and all that stuff, but I can remember seeing, sometimes you would find young kids, Hispanic kids, they would shave the head, and you'd be like, why'd they shave their little girl's head? That was why. Because they got lice, shave it. Okay? And it sounds easy enough to me, right? Like if I got lice, I'll just shave my head. What's the big deal? But obviously for a girl, you don't want to do that. But you can imagine lice not just in the hair, but on the body, in your animals, everywhere. I mean, just absolutely nasty. What a frustration that would be. And there was lice on man and beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. So we see his power over land, and look at this. Now at this point, again, it's intensifying. Verse 18, the magicians are powerless against this. Verse 18, now the magicians so worked with their enchantments to bring forth lice. Why? Of all the things that you could do, you can make snakes out of sticks. And when given the opportunity, seriously, you want to try and make lice? Why would you want to do that? Verse 18, the magicians so worked with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. Finally, here is something that they cannot duplicate. So as these plagues intensify, first it was the water turned to blood. People couldn't drink. Then it turns into the water bringing forth frogs. People couldn't sleep. They couldn't conduct their life, their business. Then all of the frogs die. Next is lice. And not only are they on people, but they're on the animals. But each time we saw the magicians, these people who were practicing magic, or what we might call black magic, or the occult, they were involved in the occult. We saw each time that they were attempting to do their best. They were duplicating what God had already done. They couldn't do anything better. They could just duplicate what God had done. But now, finally, they try with their enchantments, but they have no power whatsoever. They could not. So there were lice on man and beast, verse 18. Verse 19 says, then the magicians said to Pharaoh, look at what the magicians say. This is the finger of God. We don't even know who God is, but whatever Moses and Aaron are saying about this God, this has got to be true. It has to be true, because we're not able to duplicate anymore. We're noticed that these things are intensifying. So his wise men, his religious leaders, his priests, his magicians are now turning to Pharaoh and saying, man, we got to give up. We got to give in. But in verse 19, but Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had said. So the Lord had prophesied that. There's no way Pharaoh's going to let everybody go, and it's exactly what happens. Pharaoh's heart grew hard. What is the deal with this guy? In 1937, architect Frank Lloyd Wright, some of you may have heard about him, built a house for industrialist Hibbard Johnson. What a name, Hibbard. One rainy evening, Hibbard Johnson was entertaining distinguished guests for dinner when the roof began to leak. The water seeped through directly above Johnson himself, dripping steadily onto his bald head. Irate, he called Wright in Phoenix, Arizona. Frank, he yelled, you built this beautiful house for me and we enjoy it very much, but I have told you the roof leaks. And right now I am with some friends and distinguished guests, and it is leaking right on top of my head. Wright replied, well, Hib, why don't you move your chair? Some people are so stubborn, it's like, I'm not moving. I'm staying right here. This is where I belong. This is my spot. You can't tell me where to go. I mean, some of you may have experienced that before. Like maybe a younger sibling. Picture them, you're out at the park, or you're out maybe at, you're out somewhere and they're sitting in the sun. And you try to tell them, hey, get out of the sun, sit in the shade. And they won't budge. Now, it might have something to do with the fact that you said, hey, stupid, get out of the sun. But they're looking at you like, I'm not moving. You don't tell me what to do. And even though they're getting burned by the sun, sunburned, sweaty, getting all stinky, they won't budge. Pharaoh is thinking to himself, this is my spot. I'm Pharaoh. I'm in charge in Egypt, and no invisible God who sends a shepherd with a stick is going to come and tell me what to do. Now, it's not right what Pharaoh is doing, but I understand it. I understand where Pharaoh's coming from. Like, you don't tell me what to do. Sometimes at my house, I share personal stories with you. Sometimes at my house, it's like, hey, listen, there's dishes, you need to do such and such. And one of my kids, who are now obviously older, will say to me, well, what about Phoebe? Or what about Mia? Or what about somebody else? And then that's where I'm like, what did you... This is my house. You don't tell me how to be a dad. And you don't tell me how to rule my house. And I'm in charge. And I just go, that's it. I'm going off. And Pharaoh is feeling like, man, this is my house. You don't tell me what to do in my house. I can understand it. I can also tell you that it's pride. Pride is keeping him stubborn. Will not allow him to listen to, even to his own advisors. Now, let's move into plague number 4, finally. Plague 4, verse 20 down to the bottom. We are going to see the same points that we saw in in our first section today during plague 2. Number 1, cautioned. And the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning. Keep in mind, make a little side note in your mind. Early in the morning. And stand before Pharaoh as he comes out to the water. Then say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. Or else, if you will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you, and on your servants, on your people, and into your houses. Same thing. The houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they stand. And in that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell. I'm going to make a distinction, God says. That no swarms of flies shall be there, in order that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. I will make a difference between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall be. How about the Egyptian god? Khepri. 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 The Egyptian god of creation. Now remember, I told you that he sends Aaron and Moses out. What did he tell them to, what time of the day did he tell them to go? Anybody remember? Early in the morning. I'm glad that you remember that, because Khepri, the god of creation, was also responsible, so the Egyptians believed, for moving the sun into the sky at the beginning of the day, and then moving it back into the underworld at the end of the day. And so when he tells them go early in the morning, he is showing Pharaoh, here I am, early in the morning, when evidently Khepri comes and, puts the sun into its spot. But all these little hints, all these little signs that, listen, I'm the one that has control over all of these things. And so he tells him here that he's going to send forth flies. Now, there is, just so you know, there are some, the word flies is questionable. Some people believe that it actually is just a myriad of insects. So he's going to call forth just all sorts of different insects. Some people go so far as to say it's insects and it's animals, just wild beasts. Not only will you have insects all over the place, but you're going to have other larger animals, running throughout Egypt, just making a mess of everything. Okay? Whichever it is, again, it's God showing that he has power over the land, over the animals, over the insects, over the sun, whatever it is. If you will not let my people go, verse 22, and in that day I will set apart the land of Goshen. He now makes this distinction between the Egyptians and the Hebrews. And amazingly, he's saying, listen, These insects, whether it's flies, a bunch of insects, animals, whatever it is, they are going to invade the entire land of Egypt except for Goshen. Only Goshen will be spared, because that is where all of the Hebrew slaves lived, in the land of Goshen. And he does that, he says in verse 22, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, in order that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. In other words, they're going to surround Goshen, basically. There's going to be a distinct border. And these insects, these animals, whatever it might be, they're going to come to the border of Goshen, but they won't go into Goshen. And so it's going to become very obvious that, this is God working here, because who could have that much control over them? And it's the same thing for your life and for mine. When there are difficult things happening, no, obviously you and I know that we experience difficult things, difficult times. Remember how hard it was to find toilet paper? That was rough, huh? But you found some. Hopefully it wasn't rough. But you found some. You found toilet paper. But there is a hedge of protection around you and I. In a sense, some people like to see it this way, and I'm okay with this. I've got a little bit of an issue with this because I'm strange like that. But some people like to see that we're invincible until God wants something to happen to us. The only reason I have an issue with that is because some people use that as a source of pride. Like, I'm invincible and I could, leap tall buildings in a single bound and run faster than a locomotive or speeding bullet or whatever it is. And sometimes they use that as a source of pride. But the truth is that God has a hedge of protection around you and I. And how many times have we come close to death? I remember before I was even saved, but obviously I look back, I know that God already had a plan. We used to go to house parties, okay? It was all innocent. It was just, we'd sit around the campfire and sing songs, okay? But I can remember my wife at the time, who was my girlfriend at the time, although we were on again, off again, you know how that goes. We had walked out of the party and I went to get something out of my car. And we were standing at the back of my car. And we were talking for just a moment and then I hear, shoop. It's like, that was weird, what was that? And then we hear it again, shoop. It's like, did you hear that? It's like, yeah. What was that? I don't know. Shoop. What was that? I don't know. We start walking back toward the party, realize that somebody was outside shooting and bullets are flying by. We didn't even know what was going on. We're just back there like, what's going on? No bullets flying by. But God, I can't tell you how many times stuff like that happened. Madness, dumb places that I put myself in, coming this close to death. And back then I didn't realize. I just thought, I'm just cool and I just, missed all the danger or whatever. Now I realize, no, you idiot, it was God, with his divine protection over you, even when you weren't saved yet, because he had a plan. And he wanted you to go to Menifee, in 2018 or whatever it was. And, how many times have we come close to death? Probably we don't even know. And yet God was protecting us. And here he's saying, listen, I'm making a distinguishment. Is that right? Anyways, I'm making a difference between the land of Goshen and the rest of Egypt. These are my people. I'm going to protect them. Verse 23, I will make a difference between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall be. So remember, he called forth the flies, frogs. This time he calls forth the flies. Verse 24. And the Lord did so. Thick swarms of flies came into the house of Pharaoh, into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted because of the swarms of flies. It actually, again, as I pointed out a moment ago, it actually just reads swarms, whatever they were. I forgot to mention this, that Khepri, Khepri, remember the Egyptian god of creation, who moved the sun, into the sky, was also often seen with or portrayed with the head of a scarab or fly. A scarab is one of those nasty beetles, like if you watch Indiana Jones, and they got those, big, mean, beetles with like 6 legs or whatever it is. A Khepri was often portrayed that way with the head of one of those beetles. Gnarly. Now, again, as we saw in the first one, there is a change of heart. And this is where we finish, verse 25. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to your God in the land." And Moses said, "It is not right to do so, for we would be sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. If we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, then they will not stone us." Wait a minute. Didn't Pharaoh just say you could go sacrifice? Now it sounds like Moses is saying, no, we don't want to go sacrifice. What's going on? Look carefully, verse 25. Pharaoh says, okay, fine. Send all of these swarms away. And he says in verse 25, "Go sacrifice to your God in the land." Remember they said, hey, we want to go 3 days journey. We want to leave Egypt. God said, set my people free that they may go and worship me. Now, Pharaoh is saying, fine, let's make a deal. I realize that there's something else going on. There's some kind of other, higher power, that's revealing himself here. And I'll tell you what, fine, you can sacrifice. Just don't go anywhere. Do it here in the land of Egypt. You see, what he's offering them is a compromise. This cat is trying to make a deal with God. God is making this demand, let my people go, that they may sacrifice. And he says, well, I'm not going to let the people go. I will let them sacrifice, but they have to do it right here. That's not the way it works. We don't make deals with God. You might see that in a Hallmark movie. You might see that on Little House on the Prairie. But we don't deal with God. God says, this is the way it needs to be. That's the way it's got to be. Well, God, I'll tell you what, if you just get me out of this mess, then I'll go to church, 7 times this year. Or, if you just, if you'll just answer this prayer one more time, then I'll do such and such. No. God says, this is the way it's supposed to be. And you and I need to understand that there is no compromise. It's not, I'm going to save you, God says. I'm going to save you and take you out of the world. But then you still keep living in the world. There's no deals. God wasn't making deals. And God wasn't making deals with Pharaoh. He said, let my people go, plain and simple. Let them go that they may go 3 days journey to sacrifice to me. And here is Pharaoh saying, well, you can sacrifice in the land. And Moses in verse 26 says, no, we can't do that. We cannot sacrifice animals to God in the land of Egypt because the animals are sacred. And if the Egyptians see us sacrificing animals to God, they're going to attack us in verse 26. Then will they not stone us? So no. Moses says it's not going to happen. And he says in verse 27, we will go 3 days journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord as our God, as he will command us. This is so stinking exciting. For you, you're probably thinking like, what's the big deal? The service over yet? We got to get out of here. But look, I want you to think about Moses when he was 80 years old in the wilderness and God came to him in the burning bush and said, I'm sending you to Egypt. You're going to go to Pharaoh. You're going to talk. What did Moses do? Moses came up with every excuse in the book why he could not go. He even said, I'm not a good speaker, man. Like, I can't go. Moses was perfectly content to just stay with the flock of Jethro out in the wilderness. I don't want to go to Egypt. He even got to the point where he ran out of excuses. He said, I just don't want to go. Send somebody else. And he told God, send anybody else. I don't want to go. And God said, no, you're going. And this man, he was simply a man, just a person, just a human being. He was not supernatural. He was not superhuman. He was just a person, an ordinary person that God was working through. But notice the change in his life. When he was younger in the land of Egypt, he was prideful, bold. He went and attacked the Egyptian, buried him in the sand. He wanted to set the Hebrews free himself. Like, I'm going to just do this myself. I'm going to be the superhero. And then for the next several years, we don't know exactly how many it was, until the time that he was 80. He went from a prideful young man to an individual who was so unsure of himself that even when he was face to face with this burning bush that was speaking to him and it was God, he told God, no, I can't go. This is not me. I'm the wrong person for the job. I'm inadequate. I can't do it. And now, again, he's changed. But this time in verse 27, it's not pride like it was so many years ago in the land of Egypt. This time it's, we will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he will command us. You see, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're sure, when you're, when you're confident, thank you very much. His confidence is no longer in himself. It's in God. No, this is what God told us to do. No compromise. No compromise. This is what God told us to do. This is what we're doing. You and I struggle with that, don't we? We struggle with telling our friends, no, I'm not doing that. Not because I can't, but because I don't want to. We struggle with that. And we go back and forth. We flip-flop. We're wishy one day, washy the next. We flip-flop. And God is saying, no, this is what it says in my word. Here it is, spelled out. It's clear. A, B, C, whatever it is. And we want to try, I'm, kind of compromising a little bit, I want to be like this, like an undercover Christian, and just, play around with the world a little bit, but really secretly, I really belong to the Lord. I'm just doing these sinful things, because I'm like an investigator or something, and I'm trying to, get in there. No, come on, please. Moses says, no way, not doing that. We're going to do what God told us to do. Verse 28, so Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far away. Intercede for me. Then Moses said, indeed, I am going out from you. And I will entreat the Lord. I'll talk to him, that the swarms may depart tomorrow from Pharaoh, from his servants and from his people. But let Pharaoh not deal deceitfully anymore in not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord, and the Lord did according to the word of Moses. He removed the swarms from Pharaoh, from his servants, from his people. Not one remained, but Pharaoh hardened his heart. At this time also neither would he let the people go. And through that, we see the patience of God. The persistent love of God. And that he did not eliminate Pharaoh immediately or the Egyptians. We're only on plague number 4. 6 more to go. Man, God, just wipe them out now. Cut the book of Exodus short. We can get on to the good stuff. But he doesn't do that. Because God doesn't work like Pastor Chris does. Impatient. But he's patient. He's loving and he's merciful. He knows that not only Pharaoh, but also the Egyptian people are going to suffer. And he is not in a hurry to cause suffering. That's God. Not angry. I'm going to wipe everybody out. I'm going to kill millions. This is what I'm going to do. I can't wait. I hope you reject so I can kill you guys. It's not that way at all. He's patient. And he's giving Pharaoh and the Egyptians opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. Even Pharaoh's advisors are telling him, look, we got to give in. Let the people go. We're done. We can't do these things. We cannot compete. We cannot compare with God, with this God, this Hebrew God's power. We can't do it. You and I need to remember some things. We need to remember who it is that we belong to. We belong to God. We're on His side. He provides for us, protects us, you and I. Incredible. We have the resources of God at our disposal. Not like a genie, rub that, Will Smith comes out, you get 3 chances or whatever, 3, wishes. God's not that way, but we can go to God to find help. We can go to the throne of grace to find help in time of need, Hebrews says. Wow. God can work on our behalf the way that He's working on behalf of the Hebrews. But we also need to remember that the God that we do belong to and worship, there's no compromise. There's no deals. This is the way it is. This is the best. Why would I want to give my people any less than the best? No compromise. It is always best to just do it the way that He wants to do it. Let's pray. Father.